Recording. Okay.
All right, everybody, welcome to the League of Utah Writers Romance Chapters 2025 conference. This is our lunch panel on secrets of the publishing industry. We have representatives of three publishing houses here with us today. Liz and Jonathan with Collective Tales Publishing. Wave your hands, you guys. We have Sylvia from Timber Ghost Press, and we have Steve from Whisper House Press. So thank you guys for joining us. So I'm going to open the panel. We'll start with Sylvia, but I want all three of you guys to answer this question. What do you publish?
So we publish horror pretty much exclusively. We have delved in a little bit into like dark fantasy and like sci-fi horror and whatnot, but it's all horror. So that's what we publish.
Thank you. Steve, what do you publish?
Ditto what Sylvia said. Horror, although I will say that of the 55 authors we're publishing in anthologies this year, there are quite a few of those stories that fit into kind of a genre mashup with romance and horror.
Well, and I just want to make comment. You can make the horror viscerally scary when you threaten lovers. Yeah, you get to eat.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome. Liz, what do you and Jonathan publish?
Yeah, well, I want to piggyback off of what you were saying too about romance and horror. I love mashing those together. And in fact, no pun intended. And in fact, Steve, one of my actually both stories that I've submitted, they both have elements of love. So I think it's always fun to put things in and put things together. Jonathan and and I can have Jonathan say more too about this, but Collective Tales Publishing does speculative fiction. We've been trying to do different things to do horror and sci-fi and fantasy and dystopian. And we actually did an LGBTQ plus charity anthology. And I've noticed that our most popular stuff is horror, but all of our stories, at least, or all of our anthologies, at least one or two have some elements of romance, which I really appreciate. Some of my favorites have been, what was Come in My Chamber Lie. That's an amazing, it's a lesbian romance. It's amazing. It's like this woman learning about her attraction. And then another one was Crimson Snow, which is not really, it's more of a love story instead of a romance. But anyway, Jonathan.
The Mortuary.
Oh, the Mortuary one was it's like Edgar Allan Poe kind of writing. It's one of my favorites too, but that one's in
Sort of a dark romance.
Yeah, it's a dark romance. I think that one's in Deluxe Darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember.
That is awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna start with Steve. Steve, what is your house currently looking for right now? Do you have an open call for something? Do you need certain stories?
Yeah, we have open calls ongoing for our monthly flash fiction publication. We pay a flat rate of $10 per piece of flash, and the word count is 200 to 1,000 words, so it can be pretty flashy, pretty micro. And I would love to get some more genre mashup stuff. We specialize in horror of the mundane, and so I have like a kitchen story in there, husband and wife kitchen story in there. I've got like a lot of cool mashups. Would love to hear from the romance writers.
Can I plug in something there, Steve?
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah, your story.
My story is called Anniversary Surprise, and it's about, I don't know if you'd call it a love triangle or whatever, but it's definitely a horror and romance mashup story. When is it coming out? February 1st?
February 1st.
On your website.
Yeah. Yeah, we're putting one of those out a month, so if anybody wants to send me their flash, I would love to get it.
It reminds me of that line from Silence of the Lambs. I had him with fava beans and Chianti. You know, it's for lunch or dinner, technically. Thank you. So I'm going to go Sylvia next. What are you looking for right now? Any open calls?
We're currently not open for anything at the moment, but we will open probably mid or late February for flash and poetry that we publish on our site newsletter throughout we do 2 a month basically. And that you can find that on our site, and I'll post the link in the chat, like where that would be. But yeah, but sometime in February we'll open up for that. I pay $5 for flash or poetry. Flash can go up to 1,000 words. So, but we're looking for horror, and I absolutely love mashups too. So if you want to mash up romance and horror, please send it my way. I love those. I love sci-fi horror, Old West horror, like all sorts of different stuff. Probably oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say probably in the late summer, we'll open up again for novellas and novels. And again, looking for horror. I specifically tend to lean really heavily into cosmic horror. I like that the best. So if you send me something cosmic horror, it has a better chance of getting picked up. But I am open to almost anything. There's guidelines on my site on what I'm not looking for. But for the most part, if it's horror, I'll take a look at it. So.
I was thinking, I was researching Nosferatu because I do, and I'm trying to think how scary. Liz can tell you, I don't like scary, but I was thinking about the love poetry that I would sing Winona Ryder's face to Bram Stoker's Dracula, the love poetry, the poem. So Corey got me thinking that maybe what kind of blood curdling, fingers rotting, flesh touching poetry would the vampire write to his beloved? Could be very fun.
For sure.
I also like the cosmic. I was thinking about Ad Astra and some of the other sci-fi, and what a poem that Tars would write as he watches Anne Hathaway and Michael McConaughey get blown up by the alien creature eating them. You could do all sorts of mashing. So thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Collective Tales, Liz, Jonathan, what do you guys? Open calls right now?
Well, right now, I think the only one that's still open is Collective Madness, which is a dark fantasy anthology. But my story that I'm working on for the anthology is actually a romance story. This is all your influence because I want to do all these mashups. But it's about a love, and they get married, and she has a fortune teller give her it was a step godmother or something, I forget. And she gives her a vision about like how their marriage is going to end in death or something. So, so she goes crazy trying to figure out how to prevent it.
Yeah, and also, we're technically closed with Darkness 102, but if there are some really cool, amazing stories that we really love from this audience, and email us or Facebook us and ask it, because officially the submission portal thing is closed, but if you just email us, we're at the very end, we may or accept 1 or 2 others. So if you have not submitted, if you have submitted and you have been accepted, we probably, we want to look for new authors too. So if you have not submitted and you want to try, we encourage you to do that. But just say in the email or the message, like, hey, you said it in this conference, in the romance chapter conference. But, I have a lot of romance horror in that too. You can make, you can blend it. I'm actually doing my romance horror workshop next Thursday for the HWA horror writers. So anyone who's part of that or wants to learn more and you want to understand how to do horror and romance, let me know. So.
All right, everybody. So I want all 3 of you guys put your links in chat so they can find it. So Liz, your email, link Sylvia and Steve, put your email, your links in there for everybody. For our audience, I want to just say, as a tried and true author myself, I left Utah. That's why I'm no longer a part of the romance chapter. But I just finished my 8th novel manuscript last fall. And I was really stuck. And so I use calls like what they're talking about in this experimental writing to try different things. So if you're new starting and want to cut your teeth, or if you want to puzzle out a problem or just try something new, especially something you haven't done before, It'll spark your creativity and get you writing. And case in point, I don't know if you've heard of Dragon Soul Press. I write contemporary romance generally, but I love sci-fi and fantasy. And Dragon Soul Press did a call for dragons and their writers fantasy. And I was exploring a romantic topic where she was abused sexually by her past partner and has to learn how to have healthy, good sex with the current partner. And I said, well, why not have a telepathic dragon make this a little easier? And I wrote something experimental. So when you think about these calls, think about how creative you can be and maybe try something. Okay.
Virginia, can I
yes.
also plug one thing too?
Yeah.
If you are just a romance writer and you're like, nah, I don't want to do anything dark and scary, and you just strictly want romance, the romance writers are opening up a new call for a romance story. It's going to be, I think when are we opening up, Kira, Melissa? Do you guys have more information on that? Because our most recent one, the paranormal romance, is going to be published February 14th, but we're going to go into more of like is it sweet and spicy?
Yeah,
romance.
It's sweet and spicy, and personally, I think it was like probably around the same time.
Okay. Well, if people
we
want
were
to
gonna
like,
open
yeah.
that up.
Yeah, and so we don't officially have the submission portal, but if you have something, just email us. Here, I'm gonna make another chat. You guys all should have our email, but if you do not, this email, lewromance@gmail.com, Kara, Melissa, Shelby, me, and a few others, I think, have access to this Gmail. So one of us will be able to answer any questions, but yeah.
So Liz, just for the League of Utah Writers folks here, the romance chapter has how many anthologies now? Is it 2 or 3?
It's 4 or
Or
well, it's
Paranormal's
Second
5.
Chance,
Paranormal's 5?
Paranormal.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, must be 5. But some of them are ebooks. And
Yeah.
then the next one though, so the paranormal romance, we're doing it as a print and ebook, I think, and then the next one would also be print and ebook.
And if you think about that, you guys have talked about complicated love. You've talked about love that you thought would never happen or happen, like second chance love. So that's something the romance chapter does. If you're familiar with the League of Utah Writers, the romance chapter does anthologies too, and we focus on romance. Now, when it comes to romance versus love story, think of a subplot being a love is a subplot. That's a love story. Romance is the main plot is all about the love. Whether you break it or I've had romances be wrong romances or backwards romances. But in any case, when you think about it, use the romance chapter for just plain, like, can I make you believe these 2 people love each other, or 3 or 4, or this animal and her, whatever. I want you to believe they love each other. Use a romance chapter. All right, so this question, I'm going to start with Liz and Jonathan. What things make you reject a query or an offer immediately? What turns you off?
Oh. We actually recently had one, and look, I feel like we're very welcoming. I'm sure, it's the same with Steve and Sylvia. Like there's a lot of like things we'll maybe look over if like it's a really good story. But there are some things like with respect that even if they were a friend, I would think I would have an issue with. Like recently there was someone so it's, Collective Madness, we got a lot more submissions than we normally do, so we kind of were overwhelmed with like, that's why it's taking so long. If anyone's submitted and they're like, why haven't I gotten anything, it's just we're going through it, we're still. But one of them, we asked, there's very specific things. I'm sure Sylvia and Steve can also attest to this. There's specific things we ask for. It just makes our job easier because in the past, Collective Tales has not asked for certain things, and then we need it later, and it is kind of a nightmare getting it. And
for example.
bios, yeah. And there was one person, and sometimes I get kind of annoyed when some people will say like, well, you already have my bio in, like, because we require the bio thing. And the thing is that's not always an issue, but if there's any updates, we're not going to have that updated bio, right? So like, it's sometimes better to just, and it saves us time to not have to like sift through and make sure. But there was one person who, was it the bio or the synopsis that they said? I can't remember, but they like, oh no, it was a synopsis. And so we want the synopsis. Okay, so I get it. yes, they're short stories, but we have over 300 submissions and Steve had over 600. You know, like there's a lot of submissions that we get. We cannot always look through every single one. Like we need to know right off the bat if it's going to be relevant. Like that's, yes, I know it's 1,000 words, but like 1,000 words times like 600 or 300, that's a
3,000,
lot of
300.
words just for between 2 or 3 people, right? Like, and
They didn't provide us a synopsis.
no, it wasn't just that they didn't provide us a synopsis. That would be fine. That would be like, I'd reach out and be like, hey, can you do this? What they said was, you really need this for a short story. And their short story was like 3,000 words. So it wasn't that short. And I was like, I'm sorry, I got really mad because it was just really disrespectful. Cause I was like, well, yeah, we need it. We ask it even from people who we know. We really, we even do it for our own stuff. Like it just speeds up the process. And now you've shown us that you've disrespected us and you don't think our time is valuable. And so I just rejected them right off the spot. And I actually told them, I emailed them and I was like, you did not provide a synopsis. So we're rejecting this. But I mean, if someone had a really poorly written synopsis or like a really short synopsis, we still consider it. What really bothered me was the respect. That was all, like, because it shows like, oh, you're going to be a problem throughout this whole publishing process. Like those beginning submission things give us clues on how you're going to be through the publishing process. Because it's not just you submit it and it's done. There's a whole process that goes through it. So anyway, long tangent over.
Over a small thing. Yeah, but like here's the attitude. It's like we
It's an
asked you for
attitude.
this for a reason. And then like with bios, sometimes people don't include it, and that's annoying, but
Yeah.
we later have to track down authors'
Yeah.
bios. And so
But it's just a respect thing. It's that's the biggest thing is the
And
respect.
yeah, and showing that you're gonna give us what we need to make our jobs easier.
Yeah.
I know a lot of publishers are looking for excuses to get rid of. I know we kind of not this one we got so many hundreds that we're like, oh, okay, we need a way to filter these out quicker. So like we're kind of looking for an excuse to get rid of a story without having to read 3,000 words.
No, I
Look, I'm just being honest.
if it's a good story, I'm still gonna consider it every single time if it's a good story.
Yeah, but you know, writers have attitude.
But you have a point there, you guys. The big 5 are not. They don't have time. So let's
Yeah.
pause there. Steve, what kind of things make you reject them out of hand immediately?
The main thing is just, is it on theme? So like my last call was for workplace horror, and my process begins with approximately 30 seconds per submission, just figuring out if they're on theme, like skimming the first page and a half. And if there's no workplace involved, then it goes into the discard pile. That was a way for me to whittle, because I'm one person reading 600 submissions in about a month and a half, actually reading many of them twice. So yeah, 30 seconds on average for the first pass, and it was looking for a theme fit. And then like if there were glaring errors where I was like, oh boy, this is going to need a lot of work, that was also an immediate dismissal. Like I'm not looking for something flawless. And also there are many publishers who, if you don't submit to their guideline specifications, they won't look at it. And so you should be very aware when you're submitting. Do they want the shun manuscript format? Do they want something else that's really weird in particular to them? Try to follow that, because although I don't dismiss people out of hand for not following that guideline, I always appreciate that they do it. Their chances are certainly better if they put me in a better mood by doing all those things and just making it easier. And I try to, in some sense remain objective about it, but like, if you make me mad by like being rude to me or just ignoring all of the things that I ask you to do, then I'm going to be less likely to want to work with you. Whereas like, if you're very pleasant and agreeable, and like, I'm not saying you need to kowtow or anything, because that would suck. I'm not here to make a power play. But like, if you just seem to be like genuinely enthusiastic and pleasant about your work and ready to try to make it even better, then I'm certainly in a better mood about it when I'm looking at your stuff. So those are some immediate thoughts.
Thank you, Steve. All right, Sylvia, what do you think? What have you seen?
Yeah, so some of the obvious has been said, like really bad formatting or grammar, or just bunch of errors or it's not on theme, of course, I'm going to get rid of it. I have a few things on my submission page too. That's like, if it contains these and we haven't talked about it beforehand, I'm just going to reject it outright. And it's the kind of the standard stuff. Like I'm not looking for anything with it, like any child abuse, pedophilia, bestiality, things like that. Excess animal abuse that doesn't like drive the story forward, or excess just gore for gore's sake, things like that. I can tell really quickly as I'm reading something whether or not the gore is there to help the story or if it's there to just be there for shock value. So things like that. Also too, like I'll ask, I'm not really interested in true crime or slashers or thrillers or anything like that. So if I get a story and it's just that, I'm gonna be like, well, you didn't read my guidelines, so thanks, but no thanks. On a different note though, when I feel like I'm going to accept something, especially when it's a book, right? I'm a little bit more loose, but not by much when it comes to anthologies. But when it's a book that I'm going to publish, I will research the author. I will go on their social media. I will go check them out, because I'm going to bring you into my brand, and I want to make sure that you follow like the values that the brand holds, right? And if I see that you're kind of a dumpster fire with how you act online, I am not going to bring you into that. Even if your story was amazing, I'm just not going to bring that on. So be aware of that too, like how you conduct yourself online, because publishers are looking. I'm not the only one, and I know that. Just because we want to make sure that we're bringing in someone who represents the company and our, like I said, our values and mission statement and whatnot. So.
Yeah, and our rants and ravings build our brand. Like I said, and like you said, can tear down your brand. Thank you. So we touched on it with what Liz said with short stories, and I'm just going to say this as a writer. I'm writing 5,000 words or 50,000 words or 150,000 words because it's a story.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the skills an author needs to have is the ability to encapsulate that story into a line or two. So starting with you, Sylvia, how do you feel about the 25 word or so short blurb? How do you feel about those? Required, not, what makes a good one?
Like the short blurbs are okay. I think it's a great way to just kind of encapsulate, like, okay, here's really what this story is like, and it also lets me know that the author knows what their story is too, because we've come across some stories that are just all over the place, and I have to ask, like, what is this about? And if I have to ask that, probably going to pass on it. If I can't tell like who the story is about and what kind of the main conflict is within the first few pages, I'm gonna just be like, okay, bye. And those little short blurbs can help. I don't require them. I do require an outline or a synopsis, just a short, like, here's what it's about. So, just like Liz and Jonathan were talking about, I get an idea just to see right off the bat whether or not it's going to fit like what I'm looking for. But yeah.
So would you say like maybe a couple hundred words? I at least want to like a half a page on it or something.
Yeah, or like the elevator pitch, the few sentences, something like that.
Okay. Thank you. So Steve, to you, how do you feel about the short bits, the synopses, the back cover?
Because I don't publish novels yet, I haven't felt the need to ask for these things. So I have to evaluate that when we come to publishing novels. But in terms of anthology submissions, I've never asked for it. But I have to say, when an author includes it, it makes it much easier to work with. And it's something that I might be including in the future.
Because you said right now your current process is to read the first page or so. You read the first bit of it, right? To get a feel, correct?
Yeah, everything gets read, at least the first page or two. But it would be nice. I mean, it is very nice when it's clear that somebody understands what they have written and that they know that it's on point for the theme. And I've had a few authors like communicate that very clearly in their kind of cover letter, in their email to me. And that demonstration of like an understanding of what they are submitting is pretty helpful.
Awesome. Okay, now Liz and Jonathan, you talked about the synopses and stuff. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, it kind of
Yeah.
annoys the crap out of me because we asked for a synopsis because we want to know what the whole plot is Because if it's a good plot, then we're gonna read the story and make sure that.
Yeah, because some 2 pages you don't necessarily see like maybe the story's in the wrong spot, right? Like it needs to start later. So that really
It
helps.
also
with
gives us
that.
clues about
Yeah.
if it's in the right genre.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, is this a horror story? Great, but is it a dark fantasy story? That's what we're looking for. Instead of a thriller. We don't want thrillers, this is dark fantasy and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And oh my gosh, it's like people don't know what a synopsis is because they're always giving us
Taglines.
little tags.
Oh, they won't tell us
A
what
dark-
happens.
It's like a mysterious stranger discovers more than he can chew at the dog park. How does it end? Ooh,
We need to know
mystery.
how it
Like,
ends.
no, tell me how it ends. I want to know the whole plot because I want to know if it's a good story for what
Yeah.
we're looking for, you know?
So
before-
you guys hit on something here. All of you, your publisher gets the hook. Your publisher knows that you tell them how it ends. You spell it out for them, correct or not?
Yes,
That's what we
exactly.
want anyway.
We want it spelled out. We don't
Yes.
want
not-
to be surprised.
We don't need a movie poster. We want we're not trying
Unless,
yeah.
unless somebody specifically asks for a slug line or a,
That's true.
you know, like a, what's the word, log line, then
Sure.
in that case, be as mysterious as you wish. But I do think that it's important the publisher knows what you're handing them. There's, you know, there are no John comments about the main character turning out to be Santa. There should be no surprises for the publisher. If there's a surprise, don't make me read to page 7 if maybe the surprise makes the build up worth it, but I won't know it if I don't get there.
Yeah. Or if it hurts the guidelines, what if it like, because we also don't accept pedophilia or child abuse or anything like that. And if the surprise is something like that and we've really liked it up to that point, that's going to be a problem, right? Because now it's like, oh, you either have to change it or we're not accepting it. And so it'd be nice to know before.
Well, like one of our, I mean, authors are okay with changing things a lot of times. Like we had one of our favorite stories we mentioned earlier was about that love story with the Mercury.
What is it called?
And there was corpse love.
Oh, I don't like
in the
that. We do
original
not
draft,
accept
and we're like,
necrophilia.
we're not putting that in. That's not happening.
Yeah.
And they were
So
like, oh, can you change that? And we'll publish it. And they're like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah.
They didn't seem to care. And
yeah, now it's an amazing story, but yeah.
So, and in the chat, I just want to point out, I'm going to make a comment. I want you guys to, again, use this as a jumping off point. Most publishers are diehard, devoted readers to what they publish. But when you treat them as a publisher, you treat them as a publisher, not a reader. So would you guys say that you have the experience that you can smell or tell, this is not my genre. I read my genre. I love my genre. Is that where you guys are coming from?
You can usually tell, but like I don't think it's always like if their story takes a long time to get to a point, it might be harder to figure out a dark fantasy or just a straight out or like dark fantasy. It's been kind of hard to navigate. Okay, well, is there going to be a dark fantasy, like a fantastical element to this, or is it just like a strictly horror thing? So yeah, so it's not always
another
clear,
thing
but
too is we're not always looking for the best story. We're looking for the best fit in our anthology. So if we get 2 amazing stories about werewolves, we're only going to publish 1 werewolf story. Doesn't matter if they're both really good. So like we're trying to think of like a whole lineup of stories from that perspective too. And so having something unique for us is important.
yeah.
So
I
yeah.
just want to piggyback on what Jonathan
Yes.
just said, because I have also rejected amazing stories just because they don't fit what I'm looking for. So sometimes when you get that rejection letter from a publisher and they're like, hey, thank you for submitting this. I really enjoyed it, but wasn't a great fit. Take it to heart because it really is sometimes not a great fit for what we're looking for. Also realize too, that this is a very subjective business, right? I am a firm believer that a well-written story has to land in front of the right person on the right day for it to get accepted. Like if whoever's reading the slush is in a bad mood, the rejections are probably going to be higher that day than they are if they're in a better mood, right? And it's unfortunate that that's how it happens, but that's really just how it works because we're human. So, you know, don't get too disappointed with rejections because it really is a subjective thing.
And so
Yeah,
go ahead, Sylvia. Go ahead.
So the call that I had just put out, and I realized that in a romance writers group, this specific call isn't super apropos, but the process is, because it's probably the same for many small publishers. But so I put out the call. It had a specified theme. The theme in this case was workplace horror. And to Jonathan's point, I got 300 submissions set in cubicles and like kind of standard white collar office spaces. And I knew from the start I was only going to take 2 or 3. And then I had some people give me library worker stories. Some people do like graveyard stories. Some people do like kind of all over the place. They found their own niche within that call, but not, they kind of were strategic about it. They thought, I would imagine, what is everybody else doing? How do I do something a little bit different? Or if they're going to do that workplace, like standard white collar, upper middle class white man job kind of thing, how is it going to be different from everything else? I have one of them, probably the leadoff story, that's about a company that rents out small raptors, like velociraptors, and they bring them into the boardroom to have a discussion about their like whether or not they can be trained better, and then everybody dies, and that was like yeah, it's not just about, oh, woe is me, I'm looking at a computer screen and this is horrific. It was totally crazy and zany from the very moment. Like I knew that not only do we have to include this story, but it should probably be the first one. And so when you're submitting, think about how you can first think about what the first thought is that comes to mind for the call, and then see if you can take that a few steps further or tweak it to make it more you or more unusual. I posted a link just now to my behind the scenes like blog posts, and there are everything from me thinking about how to design a call for submissions, through contracting authors, through how I made choices about what was submitted, to how I edited and how I worked with authors, on into marketing, the anthology. All of that stuff is like laid bare. The attempt is to make it easier for somebody else to put out their own anthology. And so if you're curious as an author about what you're submitting to, I can't promise that others are going to be working like I'm working, but I can't imagine that my workflow is tremendously different than anybody else's, unless they have a huge team or something.
You know,
So it might be instructive.
One thing about that, since I was one of the writers who was accepted in that anthology, Steve, because when I read it, I'm like, dread Mondays. I'm like, Mondays, oh, and I'm like, office space. And so my mind is like cubicles. And I know in their guidelines, you're like, give me your weird sci-fi jobs or whatever and stuff. But I was still so stuck on that like cubicle space from the title. But like, so as a writer, I think I get too narrow with but as a publisher, I'm like you, I'm like, we want to see some unique takes on it. Like in our dystopian book, we had some surprises, and we had one, I don't know if I want to detail it too much, but it's about a puppet world or whatever. And it's not something we would have ever expected to get, but it was one of our favorite stories. And so we like to be surprised, but balance that with what we want. So it's like, think outside the box, but not too far out of the box. So I don't know the best advice there, but.
That is awesome. Now I want to open up to our attendees. We have about 10 minutes left. Does anybody on this meeting, do you have questions for these guys? Deborah, you're off mute. You want to ask something?
I'm sorry. I apologize. What?
Oh, never mind. So does anybody have a question for our panelists? Anybody of our attendees?
This is Jenny. I just want to thank you for explaining the hypnosis and how you use it, because you would think that in my mind I would automatically know right what it is and how it's used, but I didn't, and now I know how badly it was when I did my submission. So sorry, Liz and Jonathan.
No, don't worry. The thing is Jonathan and I, that's another thing too, is like, well, maybe we weren't clear enough on how the synopsis should be structured, because maybe not everyone knows what a synopsis is. Like we have ideas, but we might mix it up. So you'll notice on some publisher websites, they might have already gone through the same thing that we're going through, where it's like, okay, well, we detail like, okay, give us like everything. So in the future for us too, like it's a learning process for everyone. So in the future, we're going to be very specific on how, because there were a lot of people who did
Most
like,
didn't provide
yeah,
space.
there were some amazing synopses, but most people did almost more like tagline sort of things. So, we'll,
I think what we'll do in the future is we'll say synopsis, include the plot details,
Yeah.
including the ending.
including like all of your surprises and everything. So,
And I think it is because coming from me as a new actor, right? I only submitted a couple of times. I don't understand that. So I'm assuming it's kind of like when you buy a book and they give you a synopsis in the back, they don't give you the whole story. They're trying to hook you. So that's the way I wrote mine.
Yeah.
But I didn't know, right? So thank you for explaining that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, that I don't know if it's that common anyway, but like that's what we want so that we can help. It helps us filter things.
Well, no, I see it actually a lot when I'm submitting now, not everywhere, but a lot of times they'll be like, we want everything, even the stuff that you think should be a surprise, because it's like it's the same thing with screenplays, right? So like you go into a boardroom with like a bunch of producers, you're going to tell them everything because they need to know if they can put money, if everything's worth putting money into, sort of thing, right? So we're not the readers, we're the publishers. But yeah.
And I'll give you guys a tip, and you guys chime in and see if this is valid. When I'm making my social posts on my website, I'm writing to my readers. But when I'm making notes for myself, because I'm a pantser, but those few times I'm plotting, I'm making notes for me to remember. That's the kind of notes your publisher needs. This is what I have to remember to do, that there's 5 velociraptors and they'd rip the guy's head off. Remember to rip the guy's head off. Okay. Those kind of notes to yourself and your publisher, and think of them as a business partner. They have to know the ugly. It's kind of like when you do some venture capital and you have to give them your business plan. You have to get them behind the curtain and tell them what it's really all about. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Please chime in. We have a few more minutes.
If no one has a question, I have one note. I guess it's a big one for me.
Okay, so Jonathan, we have one question in chat, and I'll have you answer. So Deborah made a comment on this. Your query letter is to your publisher. Your synopsis or your tell of the story, you give them the hook in the query letter. So Deborah, to answer your question, if so-and-so, and think about this, you guys heard about my fantasy story. She was raped by her old partner. She has forced to have sex with a new partner too quick. Do they make it through? Does he heal her? Yes. I'm going to tell that to my publisher. But you guys are going to see the horror of she just got raped and now she has to have sex. Ah, that's the difference. Let the publisher needs to know all the ugly, so to speak, and give them what they ask for. But go ahead, Jonathan, please speak.
Oh, I was going to say one thing that I really want all authors to know about working with an editor and publisher is, from my perspective, I'm not speaking for all publishers, but authors can sometimes be so precious about their work. This is my special baby. I'm so precious. And it's like, great, but this is also a business. So don't be so inflexible, I guess. And so if you want to publish your own stuff and not have any feedback from editors or whatever, fine, do your own thing. But if you're going to work with an editor, you're probably going to need to be a little bit more flexible. Like when I'm working with a publisher like Steve or whoever, and they're like, I want to make these edits. I'm like, fine, change whatever you want. I don't care. I'm not precious about it. Like, it's the readers are what we care about. So like for me, I'm like, I don't care about your personal feeling. Well, I mean, I'm not saying me. I don't care about your work. It's like, oh, my art, great. What I'm thinking about is the best experience for the readers.
Yeah, the
like,
marketing.
It's like, if you really like this, great, but I think what readers would like is maybe this. And so there's a balance, of course, and compromise, but just my
sometimes
yeah.
Sorry, Jonathan.
Battles.
Sometimes I will ask, even before accepting a story, I'll ask the author what they were going for. Like, what are you trying to communicate? Because I do see my job, and I'm the newbie in the group. I've been publishing for 1 year and we have 2 anthologies. So it's not like I have a huge amount of experience. I have some experience. But when I'm working like I said, I have about 55 authors so far working with me. But when I'm working with an author, my goal is if I think it's on theme and I like the tone and tenor of the story, my main mission is to make sure that they're expressing themselves clearly. And so I'm looking for ways to improve the story where the word improve means make your intention work more effectively. Edgar Allan Poe has this some people have even codified it and called it like the doctrine of single effect or something. And basically, like everything in your story should be aiming toward the one feeling that you want to accomplish. And so, what I'm looking for as I'm editing and trying to give helpful advice and suggestions is I just want it to be as clear as possible. And if I can use Jonathan as an example, can I use you as an example?
Sure.
Yeah.
Good.
So the story he was talking about, there was like one little dialogue clip where I wasn't really sure what was happening exactly. And so I just suggested a dialogue tag change or something, or drop a dialogue tag or something. And the idea isn't that I think my way is better than his way. It's that I'm trying to figure out what is he trying to get at. And then I'm trying to make sure that that comes through super clearly. Because I do have a lot of trust for the author. Like level of respect for the author is super high, and I think that's the same for all of us here. We're not here to turn you into a magically better writer or something. We just want to make sure that that thing that grabs us about your writing is coming through even more clearly in the finished product than it did on the initial pitch. And so that's why you're getting notes. That's why you're getting feedback. It's to make it all clearer.
Awesome. Now, Michaela asked a question in the chat. She said, what advice would you give to writers when their story is rejected, possibly auto-rejected, and they don't have a clear reason? What advice would you give?
Keep submitting.
Keep submitting, is that what you said, Sylvia?
Yeah, keep
Yeah.
submitting, just
Try
keep
another
putting it out there.
publisher. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you start getting feedback and you start noticing the same type of feedback coming in from those rejections, then you really want to take a look at and start tweaking your story, maybe taking that feedback to heart. But I've submitted stories that get dozens and dozens of rejections before it finally finds its home somewhere, right? And it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. It just depends on who's reading it, what mood they're in, how they're feeling that day, if it fits the theme, all that kind of stuff. If there's a lot of submissions coming in, you're probably just going to get that form rejection, right? They're not going to take the time to respond exactly to what your story, why they're passing on it. So keep that in mind too.
Sometimes we give feedback, especially if it's something that we want them to maybe resubmit, or if we want them to submit again in the future. But I think most of the time it's just canned rejection. But don't take it personal. I get rejected a lot, and I publish a lot of stories because I submit a lot of stories, which means I get a lot of rejections. And that used to be hard until I made a goal of I want to get this many rejections. Someone at last conference a couple years ago was like, oh, I have a goal of getting this many rejections. I love that idea. So embrace the rejection. Don't take it personal. That doesn't mean that you're a bad writer or it's a bad story even necessarily. Like Sylvia was saying earlier, we reject tons of great stories.
Yeah.
For lots of reasons. Sometimes it's we already have a zombie story. Sorry, bye. Even though this is great, yeah, just don't take it personal and keep going. Just keep writing, keep submitting.
And sometimes too, I mean, I know there's some places that just do auto rejects, or they're too big, so they're not gonna respond. But sometimes if you ask, you might be able to get if they don't already give you feedback, you can be like, hey, is there something I could have done better in the future? Or is this something, ask, because whether or not they respond, I mean, it's better to just ask and see what they say too. But
Some of the best compliments I've ever had were in rejection letters.
yeah.
Oh, I really enjoyed the story. It's not a really good fit for what we're doing now.
And you never throw them away. You save them. There might be another time. And a rejected story makes a good marketing magnet if it's a really good story, especially if it's just a square and round hole, for instance. So thank you guys.
Well, right, because like, what was it? Was it Dune that got rejected like tons of times? And like most, Charlie Holmberg, she's in our the league. She's not as active as she used to be, but she wrote Paper Magician, right? And but she's like a international bestseller author. She kept getting rejected. She did not get an acceptance until 3 years into consistently every single day querying, like making it a job. But then she became an internationally bestseller. And that was, just a few years ago or whatever. So it's definitely possible. But you're gonna get a lot of rejections, and it usually is not personal. And if it's personal, they might say something to you.
It's a dating thing and ghost them.
Yeah.
Now we're at our
That's
time.
dating, exactly.
At our time, I just want to point out some people keep spreadsheets with a rejection to figure out metrics. It's a fun way to do it.
Yeah.
But I thank you guys. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Oh, Deborah had one last question. Sorry.
Yeah, she did. Okay. Query letters different to agents versus publishers. How are query letters when you're trying to find an agent versus a publisher? Do you guys have any feedback on that?
Well, I think it depends, kind of just echoing everything that's been said, is that it just depends on the publisher or the agent. But generally, with us, we do smaller press stuff. So we're really working individually with you. So we don't really need agents, but like, the bigger houses, they like to the filter in agents, and those bigger businesses, you probably want to get an agent and not just directly query to them. Like Tor or Penguin Random House, you want an agent to be on your side. So query to them. And again, it's going to be different because every single agent and publisher want different things. They might want something on like a submission sort of thing, or they want snail mail. Like it really is like, sorry, Deborah, like for me, it's different for everyone. You have to research every single one, unfortunately.
Well, and would you say like what Sylvia said, more about your brand and what kind of writer you are if you're talking to an agent and what you want to do with your writing? Would that be more of the query, less of this story, more about me as a writer? Would you think that happens with agents?
Yeah, again, it just depends. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in.
I've been rejected by all of the finest agencies,
Well done.
so I'm not the one to ask.
Steve, did they
No,
did they give you any specifics? Did they tell you why?
So Writer's House was my number one because my main comp author and one of my favorites told me they already had something like the thing I was pitching in progress. And I find myself wondering. So last year I put out Max in the Capital of Spies, and literally 2 days before my book released, Random House released Max in the House of Spies with a similar sounding plot. And I have to wonder, did somebody beat me to Writer's House to sell like my story? So, but no, I don't have an agent, and I know that the other folks in the group have varying experience, but I'm not looking for one until I know that I've tapped out the small publisher market, and maybe I'll never go seek that big I used to try to seek that big agent, but now I know that if I'm only targeting small presses and that's all I'm doing right now, I don't want an agent to take 15% of a very small amount of money. And the standard kind of contract language that we small presses use is all very similar and not generally too thick to understand. And we're not making a deal for our souls. So like I can't speak to success acquiring an agent, but I can speak to multiple failures and writing contracts that are easy enough for unagented authors to understand. And there's no reason for you to give 15% of, if I pay you $130 or something.
And I just want to say personally, I've been writing for 10 years, tiny press still. I just hope for one day if I get to a bigger, think about Fish Kingdom, right? When I get to a bigger fish, look what I've done on my own with no help. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. But Sylvia made a comment. They will tell you if they want a query letter. They will tell you what they want in the query letter. They will tell you their submission requirements. do your research and give them what they're asking for is the #1 rule, I would say. All right, so we're 5 minutes past. You guys are okay finishing up?
I want to make one more comment real quick.
Please
So
do.
I worked for a couple of mid-level when I first started my career as an editor. Cedar Fort and Ancestry Publishing or whatever. Now, the thing that you need to know is it's like winning the lottery because when I used to help the acquisitions editor, we got so many submissions. So even if it's good, you still need a lot of luck. So, don't feel too bad if you don't get an agent or a published right away.
And would you agree though? Keep writing, keep on writing. Would you guys agree?
Yeah.
No when it'll hit, just saying.
I'm getting fewer rejections and more acceptances, and I bet that the others in this crew are experiencing the same.
Yeah.
I definitely get lots of rejections, but like my hit rate is better now. I'm just writing better short stories because I keep writing more and more and more and more.
Exactly. Being consistent. Yeah. Yeah. And finding more of your niche, right? Because you can really not pigeonhole, I guess that's the wrong, but like you really focus in on one specific area, you're going to find like your readers, and really you just need readers, and the readers who go to certain publishers, probably it would behoove you to like go to that place, and then you'll be more successful and all this stuff. So.
Well, I pivoted because I was originally a sci-fi writer and nobody wants my sci-fi stories. So now I'm just a horror writer because that's all I can sell apparently.
Well, and that's the thing though, maybe people have asked me, Virginia, maybe you should try some scary ass sci-fi because your romances are too intense. I mean, if there's truth that you may not be facing. So think about, okay, so I'm gonna call it good. Stop the recording. Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Great questions.
Sorry.